When the United States declared independence, its government was shaped by the Articles of Confederation. However, the Articles created a very weak government because of its lack of taxation, lack of control over trade, and equal state representation. Due to this, the Constitution was created by the Founding Fathers, which included George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Benjamin Franklin. After 9 of the 13 colonies ratified the Constitution replaced the Articles. Before the Constitution was ratified, there were many Constitutional Convention meetings to deal with arguments over issues such as representation. This specific issue is solved through the Connecticut Compromise, which proposed a bicameral or two-house legislature. The Constitution has 5 fundamental principles, one being popular sovereignty. As a result of popular sovereignty, U.S. citizens have ultimate authority instead of the government. The Constitution also limits the power given to the government, resulting in a limited government. Federalism and the separation of powers are 2 principles that help prevent a group from getting too much power. Federalism divides power between the national government and state governments, while the separation of powers divides the national government between 3 federal branches. The final fundamental principle of the Constitution is checks and balances, which are ways each branch of government can ensure no branch abuses power or holds too much power. Checks and balances were fully explained and developed in a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers, which also explained how the Constitution would be implemented. The 3 federal branches of government are executive, legislative, and judicial. The executive branch consists of the president, executive departments, cabinet departments, and independent government agencies. The main purpose of the executive branch is to ensure the national and civil security by enforcing laws. The legislative branch consists of Congress, which is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate is equal representation, while the House is proportional or population-based representation. The purpose of the legislative branch is creating laws, amending the Constitution, controlling government finances, and declaring war. The final branch of government is the judicial branch. The judicial branch is made up of the Supreme Court, the Courts of Appeal, and district courts. This branch is responsible for determining the constitutionality of legislation and decisions made by lower courts or the president. Despite each branch having its own responsibilities, there are times when responsibilities overlap. One example is the process for appointing Supreme Court judges. Although the president, part of the executive branch, selects and appoints Supreme Court judges, the Senate, part of the legislative branch, must approve the judge. Overall, the 3 branches work together to accomplish governmental tasks and goals by using checks and balances. In order to prevent tyranny, the framers of the Constitution provided ways for each branch to check another branch or be checked. The executive branch is able to check the judicial branch through its power to appoint judges and its power to pardon. The executive branch can check the legislative branch through the president vetoing or rejecting a bill. The legislative branch checks the judicial branch by approving the judicial's federal judges. The executive branch is checked by the legislative branch because of the legislative's power to impeach and override a president's veto with a 2/3 vote. Finally, the judicial branch can check the executive branch by declaring presidential acts unconstitutional, and has the ability to check the legislative branch by declaring laws unconstitutional. There are 3 main levels of government: federal, state, and local. The federal government is responsible for defense, economics, and ensuring the Constitution is followed. The federal government affects both state and local governments by controlling states' finances. State governments have a structure very similar to the federal government because they include the spreading of power into separate branches and departments. State governments have responsibilities such as conducting local elections, establishing local courts, and regulating social welfare programs with federal support. State governments are also given any powers that were not specifically given to the federal government, such as establishing local governments, local business regulations, and marriage laws. Even with all of these responsibilities, state governments cannot enter into a treaty, alliance, or confederation. State governments can also not enforce another state's criminal laws. In certain situations, the federal and state court system work together to resolve legal matters in what is known as shared jurisdiction. In cases of shared jurisdiction, the parties involved are allowed to choose if the case is heard in a federal or state court. However, if the case is federal or the crime was committed on private property, they are dealt with in a federal court. The final level of government is local government, which is most directly linked to citizens. Local governments consist of public administration of towns, cities, counties, and districts, in addition to districts structuring local court systems and electoral voting divisions. One very big difference between the federal government and the state or local governments is the fact that only the federal government is allowed to print money. Following the Constitution is critical to keeping the United States government functioning. This is accomplished through what is known as federal preemption, or the Supremacy Clause, which is enforced by the judicial branch. The Supremacy Clause establishes the Constitution as the ultimate law in the United States. This means that if a law conflicts with the Constitution will be followed. As a result of its role, the Supremacy Clause ends conflicts between different levels of government. The Supreme Court ensures the Supremacy Clause by reviewing agency decisions, lower court decisions, and federal agencies, in addition to declaring executive or legislative actions unconstitutional. To keep all the different parts of the United States government functioning, it is extremely important for the Constitution to be followed.